So in this section, we're going to talk about virtual networking in some more detail. Now, as we saw in the last section, virtual networking is sort of the backbone that allows resources to talk to each other in different regions or in the same region. And there's various technologies Microsoft is offering to allow us to do that. Let's start by creating a virtual network. If we go into the virtual network search box here within the Create New Resource, we can see that we're given the option of creating a virtual network. A reminder that we want to create Resource Manager resources only. I'm going to click Create. Now, just like most things, we have to give it a name. So we're going to call this New Net. The first big decision we have to make is this concept of an address space. Now, Microsoft allows us to define, because this is a private address space, we can use basically any IP address range that we want. The Internet authorities have reserved the 10 .IP addresses for private use, so you will not find a public IP address that starts with a 10 . There are some other ranges like 192, 168, etc. But the 10 is the entire A block that's reserved for private usage. But this doesn't stop us. If we wanted to make this 190.0.0.0, we could do it because that's a private IP address, and there's no way any computer in the world will be able to connect to this virtual network because this is a private network. So I'm going to actually go ahead and do that. I'm feeling a bit emboldened by this. Go into my subscription. I'm going to create a new resource group for this. So let's call this AZ New RG 200. Right? Hopefully I haven't used that before. Put that network into a location. Let's instead of West US, let's put this in Canada, Canada East. Each virtual network has to have one subnet minimum. Now a subnet, as the name sort of implies, is a part of the virtual network. Okay, so by default it's given the name default, but we can call that whatever we want, call that front end in this case. Now the subnet is going to be again a part of the overall address space. So I could choose the entire address space, and if I did that, it would be no more room for any other subnets, which is fine strategy if you know for sure that you're not going to need to add any more subnets to this network. The reason why you would want to add subnets is if you need to subdivide your network into tiers like front end, middle tier, back end, and you want to have firewalls protecting the tiers, so you can create an entire network that has pieces to it, and you can create different servers in each one and protect them through using network security groups and firewalls. So let's say we want to create a subnet, but we don't want to use the entire address range. This address naming scheme is called CIDR, and it's an alternative to what used to be like an A block, a B block, a C block, etc. The way that you can remember this is that the /8 block is basically the equivalent of what used to be called an A block. You can see Microsoft is actually listing out the range. So this would be 190.0.0.0 to 190.255.255.255, and they're letting us know that there are 16 million IP addresses in this range. So /8 is clearly a huge number, and hopefully we'll never reach as many resources that we possibly could. If I made this the /16, then the tip here reduces from 190.0.0.0 to 190.0.255.255, and now it's only 65,000 IP addresses. That's still quite a lot. So every time you add 8 to your slash, you actually go down to, now this is a C block. Okay, so basically we have this C block, which is the /16, and then we can basically say /24, which gets us down to only 256 addresses. If we did it like this, we would have room in this network for many, many other subnets. Okay, we can just go 190.1, 190.2, 190.3. That's fine with me. We can actually, if we reduce this by 1, it doubles the number of IP addresses, right? So now denial of service protection, basic, is included for free. And basic denial of service protection is basically going to make it hard for people to send traffic to this in a malicious manner. If you upgrade to the standard plan, that's a paid service, and then it does more adaptive tuning. It lets you know attack notification. If you're expecting denial of service attacks, or this virtual network will be exposed to the internet in some way, you may want to consider standard DDoS protection. Otherwise, you go with what Microsoft considers basic. Service endpoints. Now, this is a pretty cool security feature. We can basically open up this virtual network to connect with some of the built-in Azure services exclusively. So I could say this network connects to Microsoft SQL Database, Service Bus, Key Vault, Cosmos DB, etc. And it basically is a secure channel between this network and that service that the traffic would not travel over the open internet. Without it, then the traffic that goes from these addresses into resources on this network will travel potentially over an open network. Also, we get this choice of opening up a firewall onto this network, and Microsoft will actually allow us to create a brand new subnet for this firewall, and it's basically going to choose the standard SKU, and there are going to be costs associated with this. So we're not going to do firewalls for now. So you can see it's very simple to create your first virtual network. There's no cost to it either if you didn't choose standard protection or enable a firewall. So I'm just going to click create. And as you can see, that only took 23 seconds for that to do that. Now, if we go inside of the resource, we get lots more options in terms of setting up our virtual network. Now, by default, we don't have any devices connected to it, of course. Go into the subnet section. We can see the front-end subnet we created using /23 address range, which is 512 possible addresses from 190.0.0.0 to 190.0.1.255, right? So that's 255 address blocks. But you can see that instead of saying 512 available, there's only 507. There are 5 reserved IP addresses in every subnet. And so whatever the total number of IP addresses that you reserved, 5 of them are going to be taken away. This is important when you're using some of the smaller address ranges. So if you're reserving yourself only 8 IP addresses, 5 of them would be taken away and you would only have 3. So keep that in mind when you're doing the math on that. It's very easy to create ourselves another subnet. I'm going to click plus and I'm going to call this one backend. Now remember, we created the 190.0.0.0 range for ourselves, and we reserved 0 and 1 for our front end. So if I was to then make that also a 23, we would go 2 and 3 for this backend subnet. Remember, 5 are reserved. Now we can see some more options in terms of choosing a network security group, which we'll talk about in a second, or defining a route table. Again, we have the same question in terms of service endpoints if we want to enable that, or this subnet delegation, which we could do as well, but we're all going to leave that to the defaults and click OK. Again, it should only take seconds, and at the time that I spoke it, it says it's created, and there we go. Now we have 2 separate subnets on the same virtual network that we can add resources into. And again, we can start to set different firewall settings, different security on these things. Okay. We'll come back in the next lesson and we'll continue with this.